What we did, though, since there were so many important issues that we weren't able to address, we've invited organizations to place information on their issues at the back table. And these are equally important to what we're discussing today. And we have time right after the summit from noon to 1. We'll still have coffee out, and we're going to have our jazz musician. And representatives of those organizations are going to be kind of lingering by those tables. So please do go back, pick up that information, talk to them about their issues. I'd like to honor all of the legislators who are attending today. It turned out to be a really busy day at the Capitol, so legislators are going to be coming in and out, but I'll quick read the names of those who are going to attend. Senators Sandy Pappas, Carrie Dietzick, Carla Nelson, Fung He, John Marty, Carrie Rude, Julie Rosen, Susan Kent, Melissa Franzen, Ann Rest. I feel like let there be light. Representatives Aaron Murphy, Connie Bernardi, John Lesh, Ron Krisha, Joe Mullery, Phyllis Kahn, Karen Clark, Ray Dean, Rena Moran, David Bly, Jennifer Loon, Dave Pinto, Yvonne Seltzer, and Paul Thiessen. And I'm not sure Phyllis Kahn is able to join us today. Her husband recently died, and we all extend our deepest sympathy to her. We also have a couple of dignitaries that are joining us today. The Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, Kevin Lindsay, and coming all the way from New York City just for this event is the Regional Administrator of the U.S. Department of Labor Women's Bureau, Grace Protas. Did I miss anybody who's here right now who I should recognize? Don't everybody stand. All right, there were 2 or 3 people that were placed in charge of planning each session, and they've worked very hard and have put together a sterling agenda, and I'd like to recognize them. The caregiving session, Erin Parrish from AARP and Leanna Smith with the Metropolitan Caregiver Service Collaborative. Transportation, Deb Fitzpatrick with the Center on Women in Public Policy, which is part of the Humphrey School at the university, and Lisa Stratton, who's with Gender Justice. The session on Voices of Indigenous and Immigrant Women, Fartun Welly with Isarun, Kenya McKnight with the Black Women's Business Alliance, and Bo Talyarabi with the Asian American Pacific Islanders in Philanthropy. A special word about the Women of Color session that we have today. Now imagine the challenge of bringing together the voice of all the many minority communities in Minnesota into a 1-hour session. This promises to be an historic session. You'll hear from women from Minnesota's African American, Asian American, American Indian, Latina, Liberian, and Somali communities. This gives a glimpse into why this morning's schedule is so very full and why regrettably we're not able to include question and answer time from the audience, and we're very sorry about that. But we do urge you instead to continue this discussion after from noon to 1 at those back networking tables, but also online through Twitter, and our hashtag is MNWESS. It's at the top right hand of every slide. And also just talk to the presenters and to each other from noon to 1. So we're ready to go. It promises to be a very fun ride this morning. I'd like to introduce now Deb Fitzpatrick, who is going to be our overall moderator of the event. Deb is director of the University of Minnesota Humphrey School's Center on Women in Public Policy. She's also a founding member of the Minnesota Women's Economic Security Coalition.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome. As Barbara mentioned, I direct the Center on Women in Public Policy at the Humphrey School, and I'm a founding member of the Minnesota Coalition for Women's Economic Security. I also am the lead researcher on an ongoing project looking at the status of women and girls in Minnesota that we do with the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. We produce a report every couple years that looks at how women are doing across the state, women and girls are doing across the state of Minnesota. It's in your pack. I encourage you to take a look at it. But it really talks about how women are doing in economics, but how that's interconnected to health and reproductive justice, how that's connected to violence against women, and how it's connected to leadership and the lack of women in leadership across the state of Minnesota, across sectors. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Today I did want to just spend a few minutes talking about some trends that I think make me optimistic about our ability to move on these issues of economic justice and economic inequality in the state of Minnesota, in particular for women. This is not a map, actually, of where Vikings fans are concentrated. It is actually a map of where working women are concentrated. And you can see that Minnesota is above average. So purple is above average on this map. And Minnesota is actually a national leader in women's workforce participation. And that is super good news for our economy, but it also is challenging for our families. But it's also really critically important for the prosperity and growth of our state. So we also know that, of course, that it's really important that we take advantage of all of the talent in our state. And it's really imperative, actually, for our state to continue to grow and prosper. And I think there's a couple of areas where we have some opportunities. We have opportunities to make better use of the women in our state who are mothers. We have better opportunities to make use of the older people in our state, including women. And of course, we have great opportunities to make better use of the people in our communities of color. Black lives do matter in this context, as well as in our justice system. A second trend that I think is really important is that there's a growing recognition that policies that are good for women are also good for men. And they're good for kids, and they're good for families, and they're good for our economy. And so we know that millennials are demanding more balance in their lives and recognizing that outdated gender norms about work and family are not only hurting women, but they hurt men as well. And so research is really stacking up about the importance of paid paternity leave, which is even more rare, of course, than paid maternity leave. And we know that paid paternity leave not only benefits men and kids, but results in higher wages for women. So the third trend I wanted to mention is the silver tsunami. This tidal wave really just demands that we're going to have to take action. We find that a recent survey found that 75% of people are 40 to 65 years old are expecting that their families are going to provide their long-term care. And so we know that in the end, the cost-benefit analysis kind of comes down in favor of helping our seniors age in place with dignity and with the support of their families. And we know that states that advance creative solutions to keep people in the workforce through aging and caregiving are going to win. And finally, the last thing I just wanted to mention is that we see from poll after poll that our policies are really out of step with voters. That we know that by wide margins, people across the political spectrum, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, really support paid family leave, paid sick leave, child care support, and other efforts like these that help families balance work and family. Now, this is Peggy Young. Some of you may have heard of Peggy Young. She was fired for asking for a light-duty assignment at UPS when she was pregnant, the kind of accommodation that male colleagues had received for things like spraining their ankle while they were playing softball, for example. And her case is now before the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, Margot Dorfman, the CEO of the U.S. Women's Chamber of Commerce, recently wrote an op-ed about this case. And she said that every American should hope the U.S. Supreme Court acts affirmatively in the upcoming Young versus UPS case. The decision on Young versus UPS will not only speak to the rights and value of women in our workforce today, the outcome will have a profound impact on the continued growth and prosperity of the American economy. So regardless of what the Supreme Court does in that case, the Minnesota Women's Economic Security Act ensured that the Peggy Youngs of the state of Minnesota can stay on the job and contribute to our growth and prosperity in the Minnesota economy. And not only that, in their arguments before the Supreme Court, UPS said that due to state laws like Minnesota's, that they had changed their policy for everyone across the country. So these policies are driving national change. Now, this is not an Onion headline. Perhaps it was an overstatement, but the nation watched in 2014 as Minnesota became the first state to pass a comprehensive package of bills designed to address the gender pay gap and modernize our workplaces. And I am thrilled that two of the legislative leaders who not only put their political reputations, but put their political power behind this bill to make Minnesota a model for the nation are here with us today. Now, in the State of the Union address, President Obama asked states to step up and make the kind of changes that our families need, and the kind of progress that is impossible in Washington right now. And Representative Paul Thiessen and Senator Sandy Pappas did just that, as well as many other legislators who are in the room today. And I also want to acknowledge some other key folks that were involved in this effort. Kate Perushik, who's Director of Policy for the Speaker's Office at the time. Jill Sletton, who was a Chief Lobbyist for the Women's Economic Security Act. And Kim Borton and the Women's Foundation of Minnesota that funded those efforts. And then I also just want to acknowledge that many thousands of people across the state of Minnesota and organizations contributed to passage of the Women's Economic Security Act. If you were one of those people that wrote a letter, called somebody, advanced knowledge about this act, please raise your hand. Excellent. So this was a really broad-based effort. So with that, I want to just now introduce a couple of our legislative leaders on this act. It is not an exaggeration to say that without Representative Paul Thiessen, WESA would not have happened. He and Representative Erin Murphy, and I don't know if she's here yet, really brought the founding members of the Minnesota Coalition for Women's Economic Security together to help design the best bill possible, and then put the full power of the Speaker's office behind its passage. Meanwhile, over in the Senate, Senator Sandy Pappas, a longtime advocate for women and the Senate president, leaped at the opportunity to chief author our omnibus bill and fought tooth and nail to get WESA through multiple committees in a short legislative session and to the Senate floor, where it barely survived a 34-33 nail-biter motion to send it back to conference committee, where it probably would have died or at best been significantly weakened. So with that, I'd like to invite Senator Pappas and Representative Thiessen up to share some of their thoughts about what we did with the Women's Economic Security Act and where we're going from here.
Good morning, everyone. We're actually not going to talk about what we did last year and remind you about our victories and our successes that Deb Fitzpatrick alluded to. We're talking about what's next, because there's still work to be done to improve the workplace life for women and their families and the men that love them and support them. So first of all, I want to ask, how many of you in the audience have ever gone to work sick? How many of you in your workplace now have earned sick pay? Not all of you. How many of you have gone to work sick because you would lose pay if you didn't go to work? All right. 41% of workers living in Minnesota lack even a single earned pay day. This is even more pronounced among low-income and part-time workers. Do I have a little bit of a funny feedback here? I'll just try this one. Can you hear me a little better? All right, so back to what I was talking about. I'm losing my name tag here. So this is 41% of workers living in Minnesota lack even a single earned sick day, and this is even more pronounced among low-income and part-time workers. Access to earned sick pay promotes safe and healthy work environments by reducing the spread of illness and workplace injuries, reduces healthcare costs, and helps parents care for their children. So I'm going to give you some statistics here, which is always more difficult to follow than wonderful stories, which I'm sure you'll be hearing later today. Among all workers in Minnesota, 49% have earned sick, but over 1 million workers, or 41%, do not. We're doing a little better in the public sector. 82% of public sector workers have paid sick, but only 60% of private sector workers have earned sick leave. Hispanic workers are even less likely to have earned sick days. 60% lack access to earned sick. Not unexpectedly, the lowest penetration for earned sick days is the service industry, where only 35% have earned sick. And only 26% of part-time workers have earned sick pay. And only 1/3 of full-time workers earning under $15,000 annually have earned sick day. So part-time, low-income servers are the least likely to have earned sick day. So what are the benefits if employers do provide earned sick? Research documents show that workers with influenza, perform more poorly on a variety of tasks than healthy workers. We all know that. A recent study found that employers who provide earned sick reported fewer occupational injuries. And earned sick helps reduce the spread of illness in the workplace by making it possible for contagious workers to stay home where they belong. Parents without access to earned sick or earned sick that doesn't include care of children are twice as likely to send their children to school or daycare sick. Again, sick children who can stay home are not spreading illness in their schools and daycare centers. Finally, earned sick leave allows workers to take time away from work for medical appointments rather than waiting until after work hours when they're more likely to use more costly hospital emergency services. Okay, so what's the good news? Minnesotans loved earned sick days. 72% support workers having paid sick days. My guess is they don't really want sick people serving food or cooking their food in restaurants, infecting their parents and grandparents in nursing homes, and spreading illness to their kids in school or daycare. So 72% of Minnesotans. And we actually have that breakdown county by county, which we'll be bringing to legislators. Speaking of legislators, so we're going to be introducing the Earned Sick Day bill in the Senate and in the House on Monday. So watch for it in the news. This is a little advanced tip. Representative John Lesch is carrying the bill in the House again, and I'm carrying the bill in the Senate. And we're going to be holding a press conference in Duluth on Tuesday with Take Action Minnesota. The Senate bill will be heard in the State and Local Government Committee and then in the Jobs Committee, we hope. And the House, we're not sure at this point if the bill's going to get a hearing. There's lots of enthusiasm for this very important legislation. It's really, really the next step after raising the minimum wage and other WISA provisions that we did last year. However, for all of you, it's very important that you let your legislators, House and Senate members, let them know that you support Earned Sick Day for all workers. For all the reasons I listed above, it's a public health issue. Sick people are contagious. It's a workplace safety and productivity issue. Sick people are more likely to have accidents and make mistakes. And it's a caregiving issue. Sick children shouldn't have to go to school or daycare. It's really a quality of life issue for all of us. For heaven's sake, let sick people stay home and in bed where they belong. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming today as well. And just to reflect a little bit on the passage of WISA last year, really thank all of you in this room for all the work you did contacting your legislators and writing letters and doing whatever you did to make sure that we we're able to make the progress that we made last year. I do want to thank Sandy in particular for the incredible work she did on the Senate side. One of the great things about the WISA bill is that it, in the House in particular, passed with pretty strong bipartisan support, and I think that's really important. And there's a number of legislators here today. If you just want to stand up who were involved in the legislation last year, I see Ray Dean is here, and Karen Clark is here, and Ron Creech is in the back, and Representative Howe. What? And Phyllis, of course, is here. Yes. That I think was really important for us to make progress on this and show that it actually wasn't a partisan issue, but an issue for Minnesotans. But perhaps the most dramatic moment of the legislative session last year, I was sitting in my office with Kate and a number of other folks watching the Senate debate on the bill and the motion to re-refer it back to conference committee that Deb talked about. And it really, I don't know, it was 10, 20 minutes that we were waiting for that vote to finally get to 34. And the one person two people I guess I want to acknowledge, Tom Saxhog and Dan Sparks. Tom Saxhog's from up north and Dan Sparks from Austin, Minnesota, were the two votes that kind of put it over the top. And they may not get as much credit as they deserve, but the person that really gets the credit is Sandy, who did an incredible job in the Senate moving that bill through. So, and Deb touched on this as well, but one of the other great things about this is it really has become a model for stuff going across the nation. Sandy and I have both been to conferences at the White House and in other places talking about this bill. And when we talk about what we were able to accomplish in Minnesota because of all the work that all of you did, people they really can't believe it. And a lot of this, it's a lot of talk in other places, but here in Minnesota, we were able to turn it into action. And I don't know if people followed, but up in North Dakota, which is not probably as progressive a state as Minnesota, there's a representative up there, Kylie Overson, who brought a bill forward to a committee that sounds somewhat familiar. It was to close the gender wage gap by doing what we did here, requiring companies doing business with the state to report and to meet certain standards in terms of how they're going to close the gap on pay equity. And it was an all-male committee, as it turns out. But those legislators there said that they needed more proof that a problem existed before they were willing to take action. And in North Dakota, we're at, 80 cents on the dollar here. In North Dakota, they're at 70 cents on the dollar for women. They rank 47th in the country. So they probably don't need much more proof, but it just shows that the progress we made here is not something that automatically happens, and it only happens because of the work that all of you are doing and all of you have done. And so we made great strides in terms of moving toward equal pay, ensuring that businesses are complying with existing equal pay laws, moving towards greater pay equity in the private sector to make sure that women are paid for jobs the same as men for jobs of comparable worth. But those inequities are continuing. And it's not the only inequity that we have to address here. And Sandy touched on one, which is the earned sick leave, which is something that is really important and that we need to move forward on this year. But the truth is that a number of other workplace policies in this country and in this state lag behind most other industrialized nations. And it's limited, and the impact of it really is there's a human impact. It limits the ability of spouses to care for ailing loved ones, for parents to care for sick children, for people to hold down good-paying jobs because of these leave policies. And if those leave policies are offered at all, they're unpaid. And so basically what we're doing is forcing families to make impossible choices. And that, I think, is what this really comes down to. We shouldn't be putting families and men and women and Minnesotans in general in a situation where they have to choose between staying at home with a sick kid or because they're sick, staying at home to care for an older loved one and going to work and losing their job or losing significant pay. We shouldn't be putting families in the decision, and this is Joe Biden's line, but I think it really sums things up really well. We shouldn't be putting families and parents in the position of having to choose between either putting bread on the table or being around the table at dinner time with their kids. And that's really kind of, I think, what this ultimately comes down to. So, we did make some progress on this front. We moved from 6 to 12 weeks of unpaid leave for a number of employers last year. And we now allow the leave to be, for parenting leave, to be used before birth, during pregnancy, as well as afterwards if that is needed. And while that's welcome, that unpaid nature of the leave makes it very difficult for some lower income and middle class families to take advantage of it because they simply can't afford the financial hit. So one of our top priorities this year, building on the progress we made last year, is going to be paid family leave. And right now, only 11% of private sector workers in the United States have paid family leave. Most other countries, as I said, offer this and allow this, but in the United States, that's not the case. Now, Minnesota is not quite the leader in this. California, New Jersey, and Rhode Island now offer paid leave programs for their residents. And workers in these states are eligible for 6 weeks of paid family leave at between 55 and 66% of their salary. And this partial wage replacement really is what can make the difference between whether a family can access this paid family leave or not. It's good for the workers and their families for obvious reasons, but we also know that it's good for business. And one of the conferences I was at this summer around these issues, a number of CEOs of major corporations, probably one of those 11% that offers this, but a big corporation says this absolutely helps their competitive situation because they're able to retain workers, they're able to keep qualified and skilled employees. Morale and productivity improves when they have this paid family leave policy in place, and costly turnover is avoided. So it's good for the workers and their families. It's good for business. And it also, and I also think it's important to emphasize this isn't just for parenting leave. This isn't just for new moms and dads. One of the big challenges that was pointed out by Deb, demographic challenges we see, is this growing age wave that we have. And I don't know if folks know, but if you think about there's going to be a lot of discussion around nursing homes and long-term care this year. But 90% of the care for older Minnesotans is not paid for by taxpayers through Medicaid for nursing homes or anything else. It's conducted by what we call informal caregivers, people that take care of their aging spouse or for their parents at home and provide that service just as a family, is what you do as a member of a family or what you do as a friend for your aging adult friend. And it saves us in the state literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars every year. If those people went on Medicaid and had to go to a nursing home, or we paid for a professional caregiver to go in and take care of these aging adults, it would cost us hundreds and hundreds of millions of more dollars as taxpayers. Nearly 2/3 of workers between ages of 45 and 74 provide some care to an aging or adult family member. And these workers need to take time off from work. There's economic impacts, there's health impacts for this informal caregiving. So we need to do some work on that. And it is going to make a big difference for us. So the reality is without paid family leave, these informal caregivers are going to continue to face this financial insecurity that we're facing in assuming these caregiving roles. They'll save less for the future. They'll put their health more at risk because of the stress. They'll be forced to leave the workforce, which again, if you look at the demographics, we're actually going to have a huge shortage of workers in the next 10 to 20 years, and they're going to need to rely on expensive out-of-home care for the loved ones, which at the end of the day, all of us as taxpayers are probably going to pay for. So we can do better than that in Minnesota. And one of the things we absolutely need to do is move forward on the legislation that will be introduced in the next week or two to provide a program of paid family leave for Minnesota families, for Minnesota workers, in a way that actually is going to make sure that workers have that kind of flexibility that they need in the workplace. One other one I want to touch on is child care costs, and it's something that we didn't make the progress we would have liked to have made last year. Minnesota ranks among the most expensive states, as many of you know, for child care. And you can see that the governor is taking some strides on this in his most recently passed budget, but we need to do better on our CCAP program as well and actually fully fund our child care supports and expand what we did. When I came in the legislature in 2002, we had a huge budget deficit, and that was one of the places that we balanced the budget on working families with kids by cutting child care assistance. And we've never recovered that, and we need to do that as soon as possible. President Obama said in his State of the Union, high-quality child care is not a nice-to-have, it's a must-to-have, and it's an economic imperative for a country, and I think that we need to move forward on that. So, the reality is all these policies that we worked on, the ones we passed last year, the ones that we're going to pass this year around earned sick leave, around paid family leave, they're not necessarily new ideas, they're not really radical concepts in a lot of the world. But here in Minnesota, I think we really can make progress on these things, and again set a model for the country in terms of what a state that really believes in their workers, a state that really believes in their people, a state that really believes in families can accomplish. And it's going to make a difference in those workers' lives and the lives of their families, but it's going to make a difference in all of our lives because it's going to make this state a better place. So let's make paid sick time a reality. Or earn sick leave. Let's make paid family leave a reality. Let's support workers and new moms and new dads and informal caregivers because they do so much for all of us, and they will make our state a better place. We can do this. We know we have set the example from last year that we can accomplish this. Let's make 2015 an even better year for economic security for families than 2014 was, because if we do that, we really are going to transform the state and make all of our lives a lot better. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's my distinct honor to introduce the governor of the state of Minnesota. If I get this thing to advance, we'll see a picture of him. Picture of him signing the Women's Economic Security Act on Mother's Day last year. This is just the latest example of Governor Dayton's leadership on issues important to women and families.
Thank you very much. I'm never interrupt the Senate President when the Senate's in session, so I apologize for that. I got thanked yesterday for the additional funding put into my budget for the promised neighborhoods in St. Paul and Minneapolis, and I want you to know Representative Thiessen, still here? It's smart. Okay, he's there. He's smart. He's heard me speak before. He's on his way out the door. He's the one who deserves the credit. He's the one who called me and persuaded me to increase the funding there. So thank you, Representative Thiessen, for your leadership in that and so many other important areas. And all I can say is, that they may change the name, but until they install air conditioning, this will always be the Kelly Inn. So I admire your perseverance already, but it's over 30 years ago that I was working for Rudy Perpich, and he and his back then called Commissioner of Employee Relations, Nino Rothschild. I think Nino was going to coin the phrase, at least it was the first time I heard it, was equal pay for work of comparable worth, which seems pretty commonsensical and certainly seems like it ought to be a requirement. And thanks to legislative leaders who are here today, and thanks to so many of you who have worked so hard tirelessly during this time, we made great progress. But it's still a patchwork in Minnesota. And James Madison once said that if men were angels, government would not be necessary. Well, I haven't seen men become any more angelic in my 38 years of government. So we have this inconsistency where some have adopted some very enlightened practices. I like to believe the state of Minnesota has been part of that. But there's still just such a long ways to go. And that's why your commitment for being here today and our commitment to continue to work together, I really commend the legislative leaders who are here for the Women's Economic Security Act last year. That was a big milestone and a long step forward to where we ought to be. But as I said, so much of it is still left at the discretion of employers, some of whom are enlightened and some of whom have a ways to go. So, you think of all the fight about the minimum wage. We took somebody working full-time under state law could be paid less than half of the federal poverty level for a family of four, all the way up to somebody working full-time being paid at the level, federal poverty level, at 2/3 of the federal poverty level. And people thought that was a shocking, radical step forward. 2 years when it reaches $9.50 an hour, it will be 80% of the federal poverty level for somebody working full-time. So we say, why do people work? Well, one of the reasons certainly is economic security. that you've identified. Well, there's no economic security in working 40 hours a week and not being able to raise your family's income to even the federal poverty level, much less beyond that. We just signed a contract with SEIU for personal care attendants, and we, with their forbearance because of the political limitations in the legislature this time, settled for a minimum wage or a floor of about $10.50 an hour, and for all of 5 paid personal leave days for the whole year. Those are holidays, vacations, sick leave, family leave, 5 days a year. And a minimum wage of $10.50 an hour and 5 paid personal leave days is going to cost the state, if it's approved by the workers and then approved by the legislature, about $8 million a year more than being paid now, which shows you the gap between what's minimally appropriate for people who are taking care of our friends, family, loved ones, and not too long now for some of us ourselves. I said, beware the personal care attendant whose career you save may soon become your own. And that's what we're doing with here. People who are who want to make a career out of taking care of other people, and then aren't paying or responsibly for their efforts to do so. So we're looking at a long ways to go, and we're looking at a need to continue to have the legislature and the executive branch of state government set the bar higher and higher, so that we won't be needing to suffocate in the Kelly Inn in the years ahead, because we'll be out there reaping the progress from all of the hard work that all of you are engaged in. So I thank you very much for that, and thank you for all your hard work to make the progress we've achieved so far, and now we're on to the next round. So thank you.